game. It's a rich thing.
Guys, welcome back to the channel. On this episode, we're going to be back working on the chassis. We're going to install some cab mounts on the corners here and up here so that we can get this thing looking more like a truck and get the cab transferred over from the third bay into the second bay here. We're going to work on that, but first, what we're going to work on is we got some Speed Engineering turbo headers. These are just cheap $250 headers. 304 stainless, and we're going to set them up for some EGT bungs. So you can see I already started a little bit of drilling and work on these, but didn't want to get too far ahead. We'll show you guys what we're going to do next. So whenever you're welding stainless steel like this, it's a good idea to purge the welds. So what I did ahead of time here, if I can get it out, is I made up this little adapter block. It's just 3D printed out of some polycarbonate, and it presses in the end of the collector here and has a quick disconnect fitting. I also got a dual regulator for my argon bottle and made a quick little detach setup, if I can grab it here, setup that I can purge argon through the system. So we're gonna go ahead and show you the process. You're gonna need to go ahead and bring these holes out just a little bit larger. Get these little bungs, they're little 1/8 inch MPT bungs, sort of ground so that they fit nice and flush. You can see we just need to sort of take out and cope those a little bit manually with a grinder and get them set onto these headers. And then we are going to tape off the header with some Kapton tape. It's high heat Kapton tape. On the inside of the flange to prevent excess argon flow. And we should be ready to weld it then. So let's get started. Okay, so excuse the noise, I got the fans running over here, the air conditioner, the fan over there. I went ahead, I taped all this off, I got the gas flow the way I need it, or the blockages the way I need it. What we're going to do is we already sort of coped this and it fits pretty good on here. We're gonna just tack this in place without any extra purge, and I'll show you how we're gonna do that. And then we're going to purge it. The reason we're not going to purge it while we're tacking it is I'm going to use this little rod, which I dropped on the floor. This little rod slides through this pretty tightly, and that allows me to stick it in the hole and get it all lined up so I can make sure that I can pass a probe through the center of the port when I'm done. So because of that, and since I have this taped off so heavily, I don't want any blowouts, risk of blowout, and this doesn't allow enough gas flow out. Now, when we are done tacking it, the gas will exit through this port here, and that should provide enough gas flow that we don't have any blowout issues. So we're gonna go ahead and tack this up and try to weld this out, and I'll just continue along unless I have some sort of explosion. You'll see it on camera, and we'll just continue until we're done and see how it looks. Okay, so that was my first time welding stainless. This is way too hot. Let me show you. That's too hot. This is a little cooler. That's about 80 amps. This was 90 amps. This was 80 amps. Then I was like, okay, back or way down. That was 70 amps. This is all the way down here at like 70 amps, and I had the gas flow way up around 40 CFH. As far as the purge goes, there's not too much sugar there that I can tell. It definitely wasn't the cleanest on the backside either, so I'm not sure if that's gonna be good or not. I might just get a little abrasive wheel and grind those back a little bit just to be sure, but they're probably gonna work. So that was the first try, and it doesn't look awful, so I'll take it. Okay, so this is header 2 here. I got a little bit better color on the welds this time. I mounted it up in the vise that's on the other side there, up here on the bench, and that allowed me to get into position a little bit better and move a little bit quicker while I was welding. So these are all installed. You'll notice that there's a little bit of shift line to line. If you ran a straight edge across these, they wouldn't match up. But that's because I didn't go try to line them all up. I just made them right angles to the tube that was 2.5 inches out from the flange. So marked the line 2.5 inches out from the flange, and then whichever angle the tube was at, I set it 90 degrees to that angle, and then that way the EGT port will come in the same way every time, rather than trying to grind them and make them long and short and all that. I want this to be the same length relative to this surface, so that when I stick an EGT probe in here, they're going to be consistent depth into the header. That's more important to me than having all these in a line. Plus, when this is mounted on the truck, it's going to be mounted like this, so you're not even going to see those EGT plugs hanging out the bottom. So not too much of a concern there cosmetically. But yeah, this is much better. It's a little hot, much better color. The first one got really hot over here. You can see it got a gray tint to it. That one's there, it's probably lost some of its corrosion, but the rest of these are doing pretty good. So that was our first shot at welding stainless. We're gonna have a lot more of that on this project, but I figured that was a good practice part to work on. So next up, what we're gonna do is we're going to fire up a plasma cutter, cut out our parts, and then we're gonna move on to the cab mounts. Okay, so it's Saturday and I have a free day to myself. My wife and my daughter are out shopping, so we're gonna work on this a little bit more. You saw just a little bit ago, we got the headers done. Now we're gonna move on to the cab mounts. So the cab mounts are gonna be a plate design. They're gonna mount here and here, and they extend off a little bit so that we have room to mount our cage and other stuff. And they will also have sort of like stiffening ribs to hold them up, which will beef them up. They're actually gonna be a good bit stronger than the factory cab corners. So what we need to do is we need to cut on the plasma cutter, get those parts cut out. And then we also need to take this chassis jig and just double check all our dimensions and make sure that our plumb bob lines are all good on the floor, because we're gonna have to take some measurements out today. And I wanna make sure that everything is good and square, because this is a critical chassis dimension. It's one of the last critical chassis dimensions that we actually need to do. And so we'll get started on that, and then I think we'll go over there and fire the plasma cutter. Okay, so I got my steel cut out on the plasma. It's outside right now in a bucket covered in vinegar. I'm trying to pickle some of the scale off because there's so many pieces that I don't feel like grinding all the scale off. But anyways, I went in, got on the CAD, went ahead and just made up some rough crude drawings here to sort of help me with my layouts. So what we're going to do next is we're going to come over here on the chassis. I'm going to reinstall some plumb bobs that I accidentally ripped off. I kicked them or something like that with my feet. We're going to install those, make sure that the table is lined up back again with the ground. Then we're going to take some measurements on this, the whole chassis itself, make sure the chassis is on the table correctly, because I had to loosen and tighten these clamps a couple times. I just want to make sure nothing got bumped or shifted. Even though there's a lot of weight on this chassis, you'd be amazed what you know, a good solid hit from your knee can move. And it could definitely shift it. On steel, there's not that much friction. So gonna just make sure all these measurements are good, everything's centered up here correctly, and then we'll start getting to that print. I'm going to measure back. We're gonna base everything on the front wheel center line, and we're gonna come back here and we're gonna get all our dimensions that we need to run to get the cab corner sort of set in place. We're gonna go ahead and measure those out and put them on the table. So let's get started. Okay, so I got the truck tuned in about as best as I can. Full transparency here. So whenever you're welding something like this, there's going to be some movement. So I'll tell you what the movement is right now. So right now I have the center portions here, and back there centered up like perfectly. I got the plumb bobs down on the ground. They're like splitting hairs. I shifted this one ever so slightly, probably about 1/16 of an inch with a ratchet strap. Everything here is nice and like squared up, datum point wise. The front of the truck up here, if I go to the extreme frame rails here, and I use a right angle to measure off this rail to the center, I'm about 3/32 of an inch that way, okay? So 3/32 of an inch that way. The whole frame is shifted that way when you look in relationship to the plumb bob line. Now remember, we did all sorts of welding up in here, so 3/32 shifted on the front's not too bad. In the back, we're shifted about 1/8 of an inch in the same direction. It's that way. So if you look at the chassis, the middle section's pretty good because there's not a lot of welding going on in there. And then past the front cross member, it's about a little less than 1/8 this way, and the back is a little less than 1/8 that way. Is that gonna matter? No, not at all. But it's just something you want to keep in mind, and check that stuff throughout your build to make sure that if there's stuff that needs to be balanced and critical, that you're sort of taking in account of, you know, where stuff is moving. Some stuff you want to reference where the frame rails actually are. Some stuff you want to reference where true center actually is. You just need to make the decisions depending on what you're welding on, whether or not you're going off the true center of, you know, the build, or if you're going off the center of where the frame rails are warped to. So 1/8 of an inch, I mean, you're talking very little movement there. You're not even gonna see that in the body gaps. So especially with these big truck bed body gaps and stuff that you're gonna have. So it's not too big of a concern here, but I just wanted to get it centered up. Right now, I'm confident that this middle section that we are going to be welded on is zeroed out. Everything's within 1/16 of an inch of where I need it to be on center. So when we start referencing our dimensions off of center lines and stuff like that, I know that I'm not shifting the cab of the truck one direction or the other, and nothing's going to be goofy fitment wise when we set the cab on. So next up, I need to get the plates out, run some measurements from the front wheel center line, and then we're gonna start going off of that print and deciding, you know, where my datums are for the individual plates, and we'll get those marked up. Okay, so let's show you guys what I got here. This is one of four, but you can see I have 3 16-inch plate. They're risers and braces that will be on the bottom here. Then the upper part is a piece of 3-inch Schedule 40 pipe, which is ridiculously heavy, but it's what I had. So the pocket goes underneath there. That's where your bolt's gonna go and your other rubber bushing. So you're gonna have one rubber bushing on the bottom, one rubber bushing on top. And then this indexes on here. You can see that line. That back portion here indexes against there, and there's a 1-inch overlap, so that will be seam welded there. This will be seam welded here, and this will be seam welded here. And then I need to get up in there and weld in that brace. I'm not going to worry about welding the underside to the top up here in that seam weld, but I will get all these braces tigged out, and they should be good. So pretty happy with it. Welding went well, and but yeah, it's a lot of welding. I need a water-cooled torch really bad. So 1 of 4 down, we'll keep on moving. Okay, so off camera, I got the driver's side done. Now what we're gonna move over here. We're gonna take those lines that we traced out, and we're gonna start laying this out and clamping everything up, and then we'll get ready to burn these onto the frame paper, or the actual frame itself. Okay, so we got them all welded up, and I'm pretty happy with how they turned out. You can see over there, got everything full seam welded. So they're gonna be nice and beefy. I ran a weld on the support ones down there, so everything is braced in pretty good. They shouldn't go anywhere. So like on this one here, you'll notice there's a lot of extra space. That's where the cage is gonna come down and tie in. So the cage will weld directly to the frame on both sides there. I'm probably gonna call it a day for now, but when we come back in like 2 minutes for you, we're gonna go ahead and make up these rear ones on the bench and then weld those in place. All right, so it's the next day. Got this material. I just want to show you guys, this is what happens when you pickle in vinegar. It rusts super fast, but this will flake off. Like with the grinder, it's hard to describe how easy. It's not even there. You can see I'm just like, that's with a worn out pad, and it just comes clean. So you can just hit this stuff with the flat disc, and there's like no resistance to peeling off that stuff anymore. So the little bit of rust that forms on it, as long as you get to it within a day or so, is way easier than trying to get this hard, mill scale off. This mill scale here has been on the entire time. I've tried to grind this down multiple times, just throwing the grinder down on it, and you can see how tough it is. So what we're gonna do, we're gonna get working on these today. These are the rear, same sort of construction. Get them cleaned up with the flap disc, and then we'll get them welded in place. So let's get started. Okay, so we got not just one, but both of the rear cab mounts done up. So what I wanted to show you here is they're welded up. I need to go ahead and weld them onto the chassis. But in order to help me measure, I printed out 4 of these little guys. And what they are is they just fit right into the cab mount hole there. And they have a little cross on them for measurements. And then this slot is for the tape measure to go in. So you can see that it lines up against the center there. And I can just turn them to get an accurate measurement from point to point. So if we check here, I can hook it right in there without any assistance and get a good measurement here off of that line. So these are pretty close. We need to do a little bit of adjusting, and I need to check the corner to corner measurements from that one to this one and that one to this one. And then once those are dialed in, we'll go ahead and weld these all in place. But yeah, just probably about 50 cents worth of plastic for all of these, and it's just a help to get everything sort of lined up. So if you have a 3D printer, try to think about stuff like that. Otherwise, you're just going to be trying to hold in the center of this hole and approximate where you are, and you could be off 1/8 of an inch easy. So let's get started on that. Okay, so I just wanted to show you guys how well this all works out when you do the measurements. So the length is supposed to be 47.9. So if I hook this in here, see I got it nice and caught. We are at a little over 47 1/8, so that's 47.9, just about perfect. Then from the back, it should be 52 from that side to this side. So you can poke it on that one, bring it over here. You can see just about perfect. We're probably a 1/16 of an inch, hair over a 1/16 of an inch wide. That's okay. Then up in this corner, we're supposed to be 71.44 across. And of course I put the clamp in the wrong spot. Slide it through here and reach up. Sorry for the motion sickness on the camera. Had to snap it on there. So 71.44, and I just need to rotate this little guy around so I can measure. Look at that. Can't get much better than that. It's supposed to be 71.44, and we're just a hair under a half. So this one here is dead nuts. So we're gonna repeat those measurements on this side, make sure nothing's goofy over there, and then these 2 rears are gonna be dead nuts. And they're going to be way more accurate than they need to be because they have 1 3/8 holes in them for extra slack, but they should be dead on. Let's go measure that one. Well, folks, that's a wrap. We got the rear cab mounts on and the front cab mounts on. All are in place. The measurements look good. So I was able to burn the bottoms in here pretty solid on both sides, so she ain't going nowhere. That's it for this episode. So if you guys enjoyed what we were working on this week, picked up some tips or pointers, That's the whole goal. So, you know, the measurements on this stuff and getting this dialed in, as well as doing some of the stainless work with the purging and stuff like that, is a little new for me, but if you take your time and you work through it, everything goes pretty good. In the next episode, what we're gonna do is hopefully my transmission adapter, my billet transmission adapter, will be here for the DCT transmission. We can mount that up to our LT engine and sort of set it up here in the front cross member section and sort of get it placed, and then hopefully we can get the cab off the truck and sit it on, and we can see how many adjustments we need to make everything fit. So that's probably coming up next episode. Until next time, like and subscribe, and I appreciate all the views and comments that you guys leave, so have a good one.